early Vajpayee was not the Nehruvian we know at all. He in fact seemed to be the diametrically opposite. I began to see a pattern in his genuine dilemmas on one hand and double speaks. That every time there was जिसको कहते हैं काले बादल मंडराते थे over the RSS, he would protect the RSS.
You've specifically shied away from calling him a mukhota. Why is that?
Well, I mean, Manisha, I think ideologues do that kind of thing. I'm not an ideologue. I think it would be a reduction. See, in my head, it's a contradiction. A swayamsevak being, a swayamsevak also being an MP, being, representing the same thing in constitution. Because, sometimes Sangh Parivar's ethos are anti-constitution in many ways. Okay, but he saw no contradiction. He saw being a swayamsevak and being a citizen who could represent a party, it was perfectly compatible. And that's why I'm saying that he thought that Hindutva was the only genuine model of secularism, he thought, in some ways.
Welcome to Newslaundry Interviews. Today we have with us Abhishek Choudhary, journalist and author, and we're going to be discussing his book, Vajpayee, The Ascent of the Hindu Right, 1924-1977. This is the first volume. It's a biography of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And it's creating a lot of waves. So congratulations on that. Thanks. I think if you're on Twitter or on social media, you can't escape being recommended this book these days. So really congratulations. This is a labor of love. You worked on this for 7 years. And just a little detail for our audience. Abhishek had worked with Newslaundry in 2015 before he began writing his book.
Right.
And we've known each other since then. So he's a friend. So I'll be very kind to you through the interview.
Thank you.
And so you've been working on this for 7 years. And like I said, you were with Newslaundry for how long were you with us?
And embarrassingly, 3 months only. Yeah.
And then we tortured you so much, you decided, let me just plunge into a book.
Well, I wouldn't put it that way, but yeah.
Not see another newsroom again. So I think the first question that comes to everyone's mind, and I think we should begin with that, is why Atal Bihari Vajpayee? Because he's someone who's been written about a lot. We've had 2 biographies on him, 2 famous ones at least. You've had his own writing and his own speeches examined quite a bit. So this is a person who also wrote about his own self, his feelings through his poems. So there's a lot known about Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Why did you decide to do a biography of him?
Well, first of all, Manisha, thank you for that very generous introduction. Basically, the idea first came to me was even before I joined Newslaundry. It was in 2013.
Okay.
So 2 things happened. For the first, I never took biography, the genre, very seriously, even after I became a serious reader. And I thought it was, it was about mostly praising dead men, often dead white men. कि मर गए तो उनकी तारीफ करो, तो hagiography. So I never took it very seriously. But for the first time, it just so happened that, I read a couple of good biographies in quick succession. And I also did a workshop with Patrick French. And partly because he was such a popular biographer and I wanted to impress him, but partly also because I was curious about the nuts and bolts of writing. I came from economics, had just begun writing. So I was not formally trained either as a journalist or, I had never done a creative writing course. So I was really interested in learning the nuts and bolts. And so I kind of over-prepared and I read a couple of biographies and that's how, and I realized that, biographies could actually be a very powerful standalone genre. So this is the realization that came to me in 2013. Simultaneously, something else happened because, like all of us who were journalists or learning to read or write, I was also curious about the political thing that was going on. There was a succession, very bitter succession struggle inside BJP and, Modi had just been nominated and there was a lot of buzz about Sangh Parivar and who they were and what they were up to. And obviously, Mr. Advani was sulking and everybody was very nostalgic about the ages of Advani and Atal ki abhi अटल जी होते तो कैसा होता कि वो ऐसा करते वो ऐसा तो बिल्कुल नहीं करते कि किसी को इग्नोर कर देते. So there was not a lot of nostalgia and it was partly out of that curiosity that I started digging up books and I realized that there was a lot of hack-end stuff. There were caricatures on him being a liberal, being a Nehruvian, that kind of stuff. But when I started going to the archives, the very first thing I saw in the archives was actually about the death of his mother. And that moved me, because then I came back and Googled on internet and I saw there was no information. And similarly, next day I discovered about the death of his father. And then I realized that many years ago when I was in school, I had read one of his profiles that said his father's death was the worst day of his life. Oh. And so I was amazed that how is it that, we do not know of these very basic things.
Moving on with Atal, the scene is independence. We're close, or at least we're fighting for it. He becomes the editor of Rashtra Dharam, You say in your book that it really kind of, the edition has his mark, and you can see that, it's really influenced by what Atal Bihari Vajpayee is thinking. And at that point, there's an essay also in this book, which is Muslim Raj, Beej, Vikas or Fal. So, and he's in this essay, he basically says that you are not to trust Muslims who've stayed back. And there's no way that, we should give them any concessions. This is very contrasting to what we think of him today. We're almost, like you said in the beginning, that we romanticize Atal Bihari's BJP. We talk about how, he was a moderate man. But his early days, at least, from what he's written, shows him to be pretty, not moderate at all, and pretty much shaping hardline Hindutva.
Right. So, okay, we just talked about his background. So that shaped him up for sure. But also, Manisha, the choices he made in 46 or 47, some of it was, of course, all choices a personal choice in the end, but it was shaped up by the politics of the time, which was that in the elections that were held in 45, 46, Muslim League did very well. On the other hand, Hindu Mahasabha did very badly. And they had majority in 3 states, in Bengal, in Punjab and Sindh. And with time, it became almost certain, partition became a certainty very soon. And these guys were stunned, like Hindu Mahasabha, RSS were stunned, what do we do next? They had not expected such a development. And because Vajpayee was so young, but the pressure percolated on, I suppose, because for the first time, he decided to work as a pracharak.
Yeah.
So he went to Sandila, which is near a Muslim majority hamlet near Kanpur. But he was like physically slightly fragile. He was not very, so he fell sick and came back. But he was still awkward. He did not want, after masters in those days, he could have got a good job. But he was still very awkward about taking up a lectureship or some such, because he knew that it was a very important moment, going to be an important moment in India's history. So he was lucky. He met Golwalkar once, and one thing led to another, and RSS was thinking of launching a mouthpiece across languages, and it just so happened they're launching one in English in Delhi and in other languages elsewhere, and the Hindi one obviously had to be in Lucknow. And so he got the job. Like, it was more like an apprentice. But
and he was supposed to be their intellectual, you make a note of it also, that he was initially supposed to be this intellectual pracharak. Bodhik.
Yes.
There's a specific term
but that basically meant, Manisha, giving a weekly lecture or something. But he kind of, you can say he finessed his speech-making abilities there. But this was a very different job. Like, it was a full-time job without any payment. And it's like you did everything. You were proofreader, you did the typing, you did the writing, you did the thinking, and you did the printing, and in the end, with your bicycle, you also sometimes delivered the copies. Right.
So, and even get ads for it.
Get financing for it. They were so obscure. But again, coming back to the main point, let me put it this way, Manisha. He certainly would have loved a temple in Ayodhya, but I think minus the violence. He wouldn't have wanted that movement to be violent, and he certainly would not have wanted BJP to make it the most important point of its ideology. Basically, he did not want a political party to enter a religious movement, if I may put it like that.
Wow, because that is not an assessment that a lot of, I think, his critics would have today.
Yeah,
critics of BJP or right-wing politics.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, eventually he came around to it, but he was slightly awkward because it was an intensely religious movement, potentially polarizing movement, and he thought, it would not help a political party to plunge into a religious movement. He was okay with VHP doing this, but he drew his boundary there. He was reluctant.
And
that's the reason, Manisha, he never agreed for Rath Yatra.
So it's quite fascinating because we start off talking about, Vajpayee with his teenage essays about, the Muslims kind of taking over and us having to, teach them lesson or not trust them or throw them out or whatever. Then staying through with a party or with an organization like RSS, who was really committed to the Hindutva cause, to then, while the final culmination happens, he's kind of wanting to distance himself from, because through your book, and now you would have entered, and you've said in your preface and you've said in your acknowledgements also that you met a lot of people within the Sangh, within the BJP,
right,
with whose politics you may not have necessarily agreed with, but they opened up to you and, gave you material for your book. Now, I was curious to know from you, because this is such a theme for us, that Modi versus Vajpayee, the BJP of Modi versus the BJP of Vajpayee. When you were meeting people from within the party, from within the Sangh organizations, how did they assess this? is there a sense within also that, you know, Narendra Modi is just remarkably different from what Vajpayee was, for the better or for worse, in terms of what they're doing for the party?
Oh, they're all very happy. They're all very happy. They think...
They're happy with Modi.
Oh yes, they're happy with Modi. It's like the final result of an old ambition, a century-old ambition. And they are very happy. They can't. Some of them can't even believe that this has actually happened. People have even told me on some occasions that they thought it would take many more decades to reach.
So there's no romanticism of, like among the liberal crowd, there's no romanticism ki Vajpayee ki BJP.
Not at all. Not at all. It was, mind you, Manisha, on both the occasions when Vajpayee was, when he was the Prime Minister and when he was the Janata Foreign Minister, there were several complications because it was a coalition government. And even though BJP was in power, these guys felt seriously constrained. They could not do their own thing. And in fact, there was so much infighting. Now, with a majority government, they can do entirely what they want. So, even though there occasional grumbling and push about Modi doing this and that, overall, they are far more happy.
Finally, we're in power. Actually, why will not? Logically, they should be, because finally you can have firm control, unlike Vajpayee, like you said, who had coalition compulsion.
Right. I mean, but also, I must put it this way, as a biographer of Mr. Vajpayee, that they judge him really very harshly when he was in office, but they are now soft on him. Now they acknowledge that Vajpayee being a bridge was, it was necessary for Vajpayee to act in the way he did back then. Because without Vajpayee, there would be no Modi.
Free mein itna hi milega. To watch the full, unedited interview, you have to subscribe to News Laundry and pay to keep news free. Because we don't run advertising. All our money comes from subscribers like you. And that is how public service journalism is paid for. All the studio lights, the cameras, all that you see on our website, it all comes from subscribers. So do subscribe, click on the subscription link, watch all the interviews unedited, and pay for public interest journalism.